My parents humiliated me at the will reading until they saw I inherited everything and I wasn't supposed to be at that funeral. Not in their minds, at least. But Edward Whitmore had always insisted, you show up, even when they hope you won't. The subject line read like a corporate memo. Edward Whitmore, memorial service notification. No greeting, no warmth. Just a forwarded email from my cousin Tiffany, who hadn't spoken to me in nearly 2 years. I stared at it from the edge of my couch, coffee forgotten in my hands. The timestamp said 5:12 a.m. Cold, clinical. That was the family way. I clicked the attachment more out of instinct than intention. St. Bridget's Chapel, 2 p.m. Saturday. Dress code, formal. Reception to follow at the Whitmore estate. That part made me scoff aloud. Reception. Like it was a gala, not a goodbye. I hadn't been back to that house in 4 years. The last time was a Christmas Eve when Caroline had smiled tight-lipped and told the photographer, just family for this one. I stood off to the side, holding a wine glass I didn't want, smiling like I didn't care. Now I sat in my cramped Brooklyn apartment, the hum of radiators competing with the memory of Edward's voice on my old voicemail. I scrolled through until I found it. The last one. He'd called after a board meeting and left 5 simple words that had confused me at the time. They'll never see it coming. I hadn't asked what he meant. I wish I had. I rose, crossed to the small closet, and reached for the black dress I kept for interviews and inconvenient obligations. I laid it on the bed, smoothing the sleeves with more reverence than I felt. I wasn't mourning. Not the way they expected. My grief was private, personal, a thing too sacred for marble halls and catered hors d'oeuvres. Raymond was already waiting by the curb when I stepped outside the next morning. The same old man, same crisp hat, same unreadable eyes. He nodded as he opened the car door. No words, just that faint, steady presence that had once meant safety to a little girl in an unfamiliar mansion. The drive to Connecticut felt shorter than I remembered. As we turned onto the familiar road lined with dormant oaks, my chest tightened. The Whitmore estate loomed in the distance like a relic from another life. Vast, manicured, sterile. Nothing had changed, except everything. When we reached the gate, Raymond gave my name, and after a long pause, the iron bars groaned open. I saw them before I stepped out. The family arranged in front of the mansion, posing for a photographer like some exclusive portrait from town and country. Caroline in her mourning black, clutching a tissue she hadn't used. Harrison in tailored grief, hands folded just right. Tiffany, lips pursed in what could pass for sorrow. They were all there, all except me. The flash went off just as I reached the gravel. I paused, still in the shadow of the car, watching them review the shots. My hands curled into fists inside my coat pockets. It was Christmas Eve all over again. Caroline turned as the photographer lowered his camera. Her expression didn't change when she saw me. No surprise, no warmth, just mild inconvenience. You can stand to the side, she said, not unkind, just dismissive. I stepped forward anyway. The chairs are arranged in a crescent, not a circle. There's no place for unity here, just strategy. The boardroom at Hargrove and Bennett felt more like a war room than a space for grieving. Oil portraits of solemn men glared down from gilded frames, each one a Whitmore ancestor or legal architect of empire. The windows overlooked Park Avenue, but inside no one looked out. Everyone was watching each other. Caroline sat 2 seats from the head of the table, legs crossed at the ankle, sipping something pale from crystal. Her heels didn't touch the floor. She leaned in to speak softly with one of the legal advisors, laughter polished and precise. Brandon slouched near the coffee cart, already on his 2nd cup, though the sharp smell suggested it was more bourbon than roast. He made a joke about finally getting what he deserves, loud enough for everyone to pretend they didn't hear. Sienna checked her compact, lips pursed into a morning-perfect pout. Harrison scrolled through his phone, only glancing up when Lawrence entered the room. I sat at the far end where they told me to. a clean folder waited in front of me, untouched. I had reread Edward's letter 3 times that morning. One line clung to my thoughts like breath on glass. Trust Lawrence, but trust yourself more. Lawrence Bennett took his place at the head, adjusting his glasses. Thank you all for coming. As executor of Mr. Edward Whitmore's estate, I'll be conducting the reading and division of assets as stipulated in the will he last updated on January 3rd of this year. No one blinked. This was the theater before the act, the part where we all sat still and let legacy decide our worth. He began with small bequests. To Caroline Whitmore, the Monet from the South Parlor and Edward's personal cufflink collection. She gave a demure nod. To Harrison Whitmore, the vintage Porsche 911 and access to the Bridgehampton property for 10 years. A slight smirk. To Brandon Whitmore, Edward's collection of first edition Hemingway. About time, Brandon muttered. Lawrence didn't pause. And a trust of $100,000 released in annual installments pending sobriety milestones confirmed by a medical advisor. Brandon's expression didn't flinch, but the corner of his mouth twitched. To Sienna Caldwell, Edward's shares in the Art Foundation and the diamond tennis bracelet gifted by her mother. Sienna smiled, subdued and calculating. There was a long silence before Lawrence turned the page. And now, the matter of Whitmore Capital Holdings, inclusive of its subsidiaries, intellectual property, and majority voting rights. He looked up and his eyes swept the room. No expression, no apology. The majority stake in Whitmore Capital, totaling 85%, is left to Claire Whitmore. Silence. Then Caroline laughed, a single high note, thin as glass. That's not funny, Lawrence. But Lawrence didn't laugh. He reached into a folder and withdrew a USB drive. Per Mr. Whitmore's instructions, a message was recorded to be played at this point. If you'll all direct your attention to the screen. Edward always said nothing reveals a person faster than a camera they didn't know was rolling. The lights dimmed slightly as Lawrence clicked the remote. The screen on the far wall flickered once, then settled into the familiar study. The green leather chair, the wall of books behind him, and Edward Whitmore seated like a man who still ran the room even from beyond it. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Not weak, but worn in a way I hadn't wanted to believe during our final phone calls. Still, his voice was steady, each word wrapped in that deliberate clarity he'd perfected over decades of boardrooms and battlefields. If you're watching this, he began, I'm gone. And I can't say I'm sorry to miss this part, but I didn't want there to be questions, so I've recorded this myself. No one moved. He continued. Caroline. Her name landed like a bell toll. You always cared about image, the family name, hosting the perfect parties, saying the right things. But when David, one of our longest-tenured janitors, asked you to write a recommendation for his daughter's scholarship, you tossed the letter in the trash. Said she wasn't our kind. That told me everything. Caroline flinched. Her hand twitched toward her pearls, but stopped halfway. Brandon. Edward's gaze sharpened, even through the screen. 3 separate budget reports showed personal expenses charged to your department development account. I confronted you. You laughed and said I should loosen up. You nearly cost the company a contract by showing up drunk to the Petro Nova negotiation. You apologized, then did it again. Brandon shifted in his seat, color draining from his face. Sienna. Her name came next, soft but unsparing. You created a foundation to honor my legacy, but only 3% of its budget went to actual causes. The rest? Galas, media consultants, a photo op with a senator. I funded real change. You funded your feed. Sienna opened her mouth, then shut it. Her knuckles blanched against her lap. Edward leaned back slightly in the chair. Harrison, I haven't forgotten the clause you tried to sneak into the shareholder agreement last spring. The one that would have given you sole voting control if I became medically incapacitated. That was creative. Disappointing, but creative. Harrison cleared his throat. No one acknowledged him. The camera didn't cut. It lingered as Edward drew a breath, slower this time. Now, Claire. Every head turned toward me, but I didn't move. You were never supposed to have to fight this hard, but you did. And not once did you use my name to push yourself forward. You took the worst jobs, learned the hardest lessons, and never asked for credit. That's what legacy should be built on. Not entitlement, not proximity, not blood. The screen darkened for a moment. Then Edward reappeared, closer this time. I chose Claire because she earned it, because she understands that legacy isn't a gift, it's a responsibility. And because she is, without question, the future of Whitmore Capital. If anyone here disagrees, history will remember that too. The room was dead quiet. Lawrence turned off the screen. No one breathed. Then Caroline whispered, her voice brittle and venom-laced. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. ChatGPT da noi. The air outside felt cleaner, probably because it wasn't filled with perfume, pride, or power grabs. I stepped through the heavy glass doors of the law office into a breeze that smelled like asphalt in spring trying to bloom. The sunlight felt too honest for what had just happened upstairs. Behind me, the others spilled out in staggered silence. Then noise. Sienna broke first, of course. She let out a tremble-laced sob just loud enough for the press to turn. She manipulated grandfather in his final days, she said, mascara resisting gravity. I didn't answer. Edward had warned me. Don't let them bait you into anger. Stay colder than they expect. That's how you win. Brandon wasn't crying. He was pacing, voice low but shaking. He wasn't thinking straight. He was sick. Everyone knows that. This doesn't hold. Harrison said nothing, his silence a legal strategy forming in real time. Caroline, however, adjusted fast. That was always her talent. She crossed the sidewalk with the poise of a duchess, the heel of her boot catching just enough light to look regal, not rushed. Her hand reached for mine, fingers soft and rehearsed. I stepped back before contact. The flash of a camera caught it. She didn't miss a beat. Claire, we all loved Edward. This doesn't have to be public. Let's talk. Just us. We can figure something out. No need for all this drama. Drama, that word again, used to describe every real thing I'd ever dared to feel. I smiled. There's nothing to figure out. Her expression tightened, but only for a second. Then she tilted her head, the way she always had when she was about to recast reality in her favor. Brandon approached behind her, his voice louder now. We have the right to challenge this. Mental competence, duress, whatever it takes. You think a video makes you queen? This isn't over. No, I said, eyes steady. It's just begun. I turned to Lawrence, who had quietly stayed a step behind me this whole time. Have the board been notified of the change in ownership? He gave the faintest nod. They're ready for you. I stepped into the lobby elevator, the doors sliding open like a curtain before Act 2. Sienna didn't follow, but her voice did. Low, venom-sweet. She thinks she's won. Let's see how long that lasts. Elizabeth C. Whitmore was the name on every strategy report I wrote. Today, I walked in as Claire. The 42nd floor of Whitmore Capital felt like the surface of the moon. Glass walls, cold light, and silence so thick it felt curated. I had walked this hallway before, years ago, delivering coffee to an intern when I shadowed Edward over winter break. No one remembered me then. That was fine. I hadn't come to be remembered. I came to be undeniable. Lawrence opened the conference room door without fanfare. The boardroom stretched out in clean angles and expensive restraint. 12 chairs, 11 occupied, one waiting at the head. I took it. No one stood to greet me, but no one looked away either. Helena Chen, the CFO, gave the smallest nod. Her pen was poised. Her loyalty had never been loud, but it had always been precise. Rivera sat 3 seats down, hands folded, jaw tight, the kind of man who wanted proof in percentages. And in the back, near the wall of frosted glass, sat Ethan. No notepad, no laptop, just watching. That part somehow made the pressure real. Thank you all for coming, I said. My voice echoed more than I wanted, but it didn't waver. As of this morning, I am serving as interim chair of Whitmore Capital per the terms of Edward Whitmore's will. A beat of silence. I won't waste your time defending the legitimacy of that appointment. You've seen the documentation. What I will offer is a plan. 6 months. 3 pillars. I clicked the remote. First slide. Rebranding with integrity. Our legacy matters, but legacy is earned every quarter. This brand must tell a story that our employees, our clients, and our investors actually believe. Second slide. Sustainability, not symbolism. No more surface-level greenwashing. We invest in real change, or we lose the next generation of capital and trust. Third slide. Radical transparency. Internal audits, public reports, an open-door policy for whistleblowing. We cannot afford another leak because someone was afraid to speak up. Rivera leaned forward. Impressive slides, but why now? And why you? I didn't blink. I reached into my folder and slid a thick packet across the table. 15 strategic projects. You've implemented everyone in the last 3 years. Each was submitted under the pseudonym Elizabeth C. Whitmore. That was me. He paused. Helena broke the tension. I can confirm that. She's been advising Edward quietly for over 3 years. The growth we've reported? The systems we've cleaned? A large part of that is Claire. The room shifted, not in applause, but in alignment. The vote wasn't dramatic. One by one, hands went up. All 11. No abstentions. Lawrence stood beside me, recording it all. By unanimous vote, Claire Whitmore is confirmed as chairwoman of Whitmore Capital. The room exhaled. People gathered their folders, a few offering nods, some respectful, some calculated. Only Ethan stayed seated. When the room cleared, he stood and walked over. He didn't smile, didn't offer platitudes. You didn't just win, Claire. You earned it. And I think they know that now. Elizabeth C. Whitmore was the name on every strategy report I wrote. Today, I walked in as Claire. The 42nd floor of Whitmore Capital felt like the surface of the moon. Glass walls, cold light, and silence so thick it felt curated. I had walked this hallway before, years ago, delivering coffee to an intern when I shadowed Edward over winter break. No one remembered me then. That was fine. I hadn't come to be remembered. I came to be undeniable. Lawrence opened the conference room door without fanfare. The boardroom stretched out in clean angles and expensive restraint. 12 chairs, 11 occupied, one waiting at the head. I took it. No one stood to greet me, but no one looked away either. Helena Chen, the CFO, gave the smallest nod. Her pen was poised. Her loyalty had never been loud, but it had always been precise. Rivera sat 3 seats down, hands folded, jaw tight, the kind of man who wanted proof in percentages. And in the back, near the wall of frosted glass, sat Ethan. No notepad, no laptop, just watching. That part somehow made the pressure real. Thank you all for coming, I said. My voice echoed more than I wanted, but it didn't waver. As of this morning, I am serving as interim chair of Whitmore Capital, per the terms of Edward Whitmore's will. A beat of silence. I won't waste your time defending the legitimacy of that appointment. You've seen the documentation. What I will offer is a plan. 6 months. 3 pillars. I clicked the remote. First slide. Rebranding with integrity. Our legacy matters, but legacy is earned every quarter. This brand must tell a story that our employees, our clients, and our investors actually believe. Second slide. Sustainability, not symbolism. No more surface-level greenwashing. We invest in real change, or we lose the next generation of capital and trust. Third slide. Radical transparency. Internal audits, public reports. An open-door policy for whistleblowing. We cannot afford another leak because someone was afraid to speak up. Rivera leaned forward. Impressive slides. But why now? And why you? I didn't blink. I reached into my folder and slid a thick packet across the table. 15 strategic projects. You've implemented every one in the last 3 years. Each was submitted under the pseudonym Elizabeth C. Whitmore. That was me. He paused. Helena broke the tension. I can confirm that. She's been advising Edward quietly for over 3 years. The growth we've reported? The systems we've cleaned? A large part of that is Claire. The room shifted. Not in applause, but in alignment. The vote wasn't dramatic. One by one, hands went up. All 11. No abstentions. Lawrence stood beside me, recording it all. By unanimous vote, Claire Whitmore is confirmed as chairwoman of Whitmore Capital. The room exhaled. People gathered their folders, a few offering nods, some respectful, some calculated. Only Ethan stayed seated. When the room cleared, he stood and walked over. He didn't smile, didn't offer platitudes. You didn't just win, Claire. You earned it. And I think they know that now. ChatGPT Danoy. The headline read, Heiress or Hustler? Beneath it, a photo of me mid-blink, as if unsure of who I was. It sat on the break room table like a trap, folded open just enough for the bold text to scream louder than any staff whisper. I didn't need to pick it up. The words were already burned into my brain. I'd seen them on 3 screens before 9 a.m. I passed by Helena's office, and she met my eyes before saying a word. The journal's pulling their quote. We've got the Ledger running a neutral piece tomorrow. We're containing it. I nodded. Containing a wildfire with a water gun? She didn't answer. My inbox was a battlefield. PR alerts, staff confusion, investor check-ins. But the worst was a clip someone forwarded without subject line. Sienna. Voice slightly broken, gaze carefully directed to the left of the camera. She was kind of around, but grandfather never talked business with her. I think she made him feel less alone. It's sweet, really. Sweet. Like arsenic in tea. Daniel burst into my office, phone in hand, tie askew. We traced 3 of the ad placements fueling the narrative. Anonymous accounts, all routed through a media shell linked to Harrison's old commodities firm. Defamation? He hesitated. Technically? Murky. They're walking the line. I looked down at the article again. Granddaughter only by sympathy, not by blood. As if that invalidated everything I'd done. Everything Edward had seen. Helena tapped her iPad. Board's getting anxious. We need something controlled. A statement, maybe a sit-down with a vetted journalist. No, I said. If they want to question me, they can do it directly. By noon, my office light was off and my phone propped against a stack of investor binders. I tapped record. I know some of you have questions, and I get it. I've asked them too. But if you're going to talk about me, do it to me. Don't hide behind ghostwriters and champagne grief. I paused. No script. Just breathe. My name is Claire Whitmore. Not by blood, but by choice. By work. By every late night and early morning, Edward trusted me to show up. I don't owe anyone my DNA. I only owe results. Watch those. I uploaded it before I could second-guess it. The silence afterward was louder than the noise. That night, just past midnight, a new email slipped through. No sender, no subject, just one sentence. You're not ready for what's next. No one from the family called, which, frankly, was louder than any threat. It had been 3 days since I posted the video. No statements, no lawyered-up rebuttals, no new headlines, just a vast, echoing pause. And in that silence, I heard what Edward always warned me about. Silence is where cowards reload, he used to say. Listen for it. I listened. The office felt unusually quiet that morning, as if even the walls were bracing for something unseen. I walked past Helena's office. Empty. The conference room lights were off. The staff kept their heads low, tapping away on keyboards, no gossip, no glances. Just tension. In my office, I sat down with the latest shareholder reports. Nothing abnormal. No sell-offs, no reshuffling. Harrison's name hadn't appeared anywhere in the back end of operations. No lawsuits filed, nothing on the books. But the feeling was still there, like a held breath. I needed air. The rooftop garden was still damp from an overnight mist. Raymond had watered early, as he always did, and the scent of rosemary lingered faintly in the crisp spring air. I stood near the railing, eyes fixed on the skyline, wondering which direction the knife would come from. Footsteps. I turned, expecting Helena. It was Ethan. He held a coffee, the cup trembling slightly in his hand, though his voice was steady. "That was a hell of a move," he said. "The video." I didn't reply. He hesitated, then sat on the stone bench nearby, running a hand through his dark hair. "I didn't know she'd go that far," he murmured, eyes focused on something that wasn't the horizon. "Sienna, the interview, the anonymous tips. I thought she just wanted to control the narrative, not torch it." "She did both," I said quietly. "And she's not done." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than neutrality in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or exhaustion. "If you're keeping score, I'm not playing for her anymore." Before I could answer, the garden door creaked open again. Brandon. He approached slowly, like someone who didn't quite belong anywhere, hands in the pockets of a wrinkled jacket. No smirk, just a small white paper cup, which he set on the bench between us. "Black, no sugar," he said. "You used to drink it that way, right?" I nodded. He didn't sit. "I'm not here for a favor," he said. "And I'm not trying to pretend we're suddenly friends. I wanted to say thanks for not humiliating me when you could have. That video could have destroyed me." I looked at him. "You did that all on your own. I just chose not to join the parade." He nodded once, swallowed hard, then turned and left. Ethan stayed silent, but I saw him watching Brandon leave. Thinking. Reevaluating. Later that evening, I returned to my desk to find a single email waiting. No subject, just a sentence in the body. "If you need someone on the inside, I'm done pretending. I used to think the Whitmore garden was off limits because it was sacred. Now I know. It was just for show." The old wrought iron gate creaked as I pushed it open, the sound slicing through the silence like a whisper too sharp to ignore. It was past midnight, the estate empty, the sky silvered with a moon that made everything look colder than it already felt. Stone lanterns lined the path, long extinguished, their glass cracked from years of decorative disuse. The gravel beneath my boots crunched in a rhythm that felt like intrusion, though technically this was all mine now. Technically. The garden, with its straight hedges and sculpted nothingness, had always belonged to Caroline's vision of class, not nature. But tucked behind the last trimmed arch was a tree that had never quite cooperated. The magnolia. I stopped in front of it, half expecting the bloom to be a trick of the light. But there it was. One open flower, pale as breath and impossibly real. I stared, throat thickening with something I hadn't planned to feel. "You found it," a voice said behind me. I turned sharply. Raymond stood just off the path, hands in his coat pockets, like he'd been waiting there a while. Or always. "I thought this place was locked," I said. "It was," he answered. "Until you." We sat on the old stone bench together, silent for a minute. The same bench Edward used to read on, usually alone, except for one afternoon. "I was 16, I said. "I tried to come out here. Caroline caught me before I even made it through the hedge. Said it was reserved for private guests. I wasn't family, remember?" Raymond nodded slowly, then looked up at the tree. "He planted that one for you, not the others. That's why it never bloomed. Too much shadow." I didn't say anything. "He knew what they thought," Raymond added, "but he didn't care. This was always yours, Claire. He just didn't want to give them another target to scorch." I blinked, hard. "Now?" Raymond asked quietly. "What do you want to do with it?" I looked at the flower again. Open. Stubborn. Honest. "I'm not standing outside anymore," I whispered. I'll build a door they can't close. He smiled faintly and left without another word. Back at the car, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. They're calling a special vote next week. You might want to be ready. ChatGPT da noi. The clause was buried on page 73 of the company bylaws. They thought I wouldn't find it. They forgot who taught me how to read. The fluorescent light in my office hummed softly as I flipped through the annotated copy of the Whitmore Capital bylaws, a cup of untouched coffee cooling on the corner of my desk. It was Daniel who flagged it, his voice sharp over the phone an hour earlier. Clause 9.4. Emergency suspension vote, activated by 5 or more executive board signatures citing temporary instability in executive leadership. I circled the clause in red ink, then underlined it. Twice. Edward's voice echoed in my memory. You don't beat people like them with power. You beat them with precision. Daniel called again. They only need 5. We've confirmed 4 signatures already. Caroline, Harrison, Sienna, and Uncle Robert. One more, and they'll force a vote by Friday. And Brandon? I asked. Not on the list. Yet. A soft ping pulled my eyes to the corner of my screen. Ethan. Encrypted attachment. Internal memo. From Harrison. To Outside Fund, Shadow Hill Capital. Subject? Future leadership clarity. Our mutual benefit. I exhaled slowly. You just earned your retainer for life, I muttered, then opened a secure call line. Ethan's voice was clipped but urgent. He's leaking confidential data to third-party investors to justify a leadership change. It's technically treason under the board ethics clause. Will the board care? If it's public, they will, especially if we bring in minority shareholders and legal counsel. I stood, grabbed my blazer. Good. Let's show the board what integrity actually looks like. By noon, we'd drafted a notice. Emergency board meeting, April 8th. Open to voting members, legal oversight, and verified Class B stakeholders. Daniel reviewed the language twice before submitting. They'll try to block it. Let them. A few hours later, as the sun dipped past the 42nd floor skyline, a new message slid across my phone. From Brandon. They're prepping the media for your fall. Hope you've got something bigger. They brought lawyers, PR handlers, and one very expensive therapist. I brought receipts. The meeting room was colder than usual, both in temperature and in tone. A round table sat at the center, polished to a mirror sheen, surrounded by suits more expensive than scents. Cameras had been discreetly placed at the corners, blinking red in quiet judgment. Legal observers from both sides flanked the room like chess pieces waiting to be sacrificed. I sat at the head of the table, a glass of water in front of me, untouched. Across from me sat Caroline, regal in her scorn, and Harrison, already loosening his tie like a man prepping for a fight he thought he'd already won. Edward's words whispered through me like a current. You won't need to raise your voice if you're holding the facts. Harrison stood first, clearing his throat like an actor on cue. Per Clause 9.4, the board may, under extraordinary circumstances, vote to suspend the chair's duties if it's deemed harmful to the company's stability. He gestured toward a stack of printed media clippings. These headlines, this chaos, this is destabilizing investor trust, shareholder panic, and frankly, Ms. Whitmore lacks the leadership maturity required for this role. Caroline followed. We've received anonymous employee concerns, verified by a third-party therapist. She gestured to a tight-lipped woman in a beige blazer at the far end of the room. About workplace tension and fear under Claire's leadership. Rivera, to his credit, didn't react. He only glanced at Helena, whose fingers were already flying across her tablet. Helena stood, voice precise. In the last 60 days under Claire's leadership, company valuation has increased by 4.3%. Employee engagement is at a 5-year high. Exit interviews cite increased transparency and confidence in leadership. Caroline scoffed, but it didn't land. I stood, slow and steady, and reached into my binder. Since we're discussing trust, I said, placing a USB drive on the table. Perhaps we should hear what Mr. Harrison sent to Shadow Hill Capital in violation of our shareholder privacy agreement. Lawrence plugged it in. The speakers hissed for a beat before Harrison's voice filled the room. Once we push her out, there'll be room for fresh negotiations. We'll call it leadership restructuring. The silence was instant, palpable. Rivera broke it. So the choice is a CEO who delivers numbers or heirs who deliver threats? No one spoke. Then came the vote. Each board member was called by name. 6 nays, 3 yeses. I kept my seat. A press liaison in the hallway tried to hide her grin behind her phone as reporters outside scribbled furiously behind glass. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't a win. It was just proof that I'd shown up prepared. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "but I'd like a chance to earn back what I lost." The cafe was still the same. Tiny chalkboard menus, mismatched mugs, a squeaky ceiling fan that spun like it had something to say. I hadn't stepped foot in here in almost 5 years. Not since those mornings I'd pull double shifts just to cover books and rent. The world had changed since then, but this place hadn't. And today, that was exactly why I chose it. Brandon sat across from me, not in a suit, not in silk, just a blue sweater and jeans. His hair was less styled, his eyes clearer than I remembered. No smirk, no bravado. Just him. Quiet. He looked down at his coffee, then up at me. Edward gave me chances. Too many. I threw them away because I thought they were guaranteed. I didn't understand what he was trying to show me. Not until he left it all to you. I didn't answer. He inhaled, steady. "I'm not asking for a seat at the table. I want to understand what I never cared to before. Let me work. For real. No title, no perks. Just somewhere I can do something that matters." I sipped slowly, watching him. "What do you want out of this?" He shook his head. "That's the thing. I don't know. And I think that's why I have to try." My phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed across the screen. I picked up, gave him the short version. "I trust him," Ethan said, "but that doesn't mean you should. Just be smart." "Always." I looked back at Brandon. "Okay," I said. "I'll place you at Whitmore Foundation West. Community Education Project. You'll report to a local field manager. You'll clock in. You'll follow instructions. No financial access, no name dropping." He nodded, almost too quickly. "Thank you." I leaned in, voice low. "I'm not interested in who you were, Brandon. I'm interested in what you'll prove now." He didn't try to respond. He just stood, left a tip on the table, and walked out like someone who'd finally learned how to listen. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. Sienna. "Really, Claire?" she purred. "You think this ends with a board vote?" Cute. They couldn't take my position, so they tried to take my name. I stared at the headline splashed across the business news homepage, each word sharper than the last. "Whitmore heiress expelled from Wharton for plagiarism, sources confirm." Below it was a blurry image of what appeared to be a disciplinary letter, dated nearly a decade ago, with my name typed in bold. It wasn't real, but it didn't have to be. Not to do damage. "If they can't discredit your competence," Edward had once scribbled in the margins of his diary, "they'll come for your character." Now they had. My office was unusually silent. No footsteps in the hallway. No emails from the PR team. Just that kind of airless pressure you feel right before a building fire alarm goes off. My phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, old classmates, even an aunt I hadn't heard from in 7 years. Daniel arrived first, files in hand, calm as always. "We've already pulled the academic records from Wharton. Your transcripts are clean, no disciplinary actions. You graduated with honors." "Then why does that image look so real?" He shook his head. "Because someone had access to the formatting. Someone who knew what a real letter would look like." Moments later, Ethan burst in. I traced the post. The account was made using a VPN, but the original metadata pinged off a static IP in Tribeca. I blinked. That's Sienna's building. He nodded. Penthouse suite. Same network she used to send party invites 3 years ago. She's gotten sloppy. The betrayal didn't surprise me. The precision did. What's the plan? Ethan asked. I'm not going to post a denial, I said. That's what they want. A frantic rebuttal. A signal that I'm afraid. So? I stood. We hold an internal press conference. Today. I'll speak to every department head, every team lead. They can decide if they still trust me. By noon, the auditorium at Whitmore Capitol was filled. Some came to support. Others came to watch me fall. I walked to the podium, adjusted the mic. I won't spend your time defending something that never happened. Because truth doesn't panic. It prepares. I paused, letting the weight of my silence work. If I spent my life running from lies, I'd never have built anything worth defending. A hush fell over the room. Then slow nods. Emails started pinging in from external partners, a few even from competitors. Not judgment, support. After the meeting, I returned to my office. I expected a dozen more crises waiting. Instead, there was only one notification on my calendar. Appointment confirmed. Anonymous donor, 10 a.m., room 12A. I didn't make that entry. And no one else should have had access. ChatGPT done noi. Somewhere between pain and proof, I found a folder I never meant to save. The campus felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown. Wharton's main building rose out of the misty spring morning like an old memory refusing to fade. Ethan walked beside me, silent except for the occasional tap of his phone. He wasn't here to comment, just to help. We made our way past a hallway of framed alumni photos, the echoes of rushed footsteps and lecture murmurs behind closed doors. Room 3A still had the same brass nameplate, Dr. Harlan Martin, Faculty Emeritus. I knocked once. The door creaked open, and there he was. Gray hair longer now, glasses thicker, but the same warm squint. Ms. Whitmore, he said with the faintest smile. You were always early. Still are. We sat. I explained. He didn't flinch. I remember that week, he said. Some intern claimed you copied a marketing model from a classmate, but you were the one who taught that model to the class. I testified. The board dismissed it within 72 hours. You never even saw the mark on your record. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. I keep everything, he added, eyes twinkling, just in case someone tries to rewrite what actually happened. Inside was the internal memo, the signed board ruling, the timeline, and even, blessedly, a copy of the original email from 2015 where I'd sent the presentation outline before the accusation. Ethan leaned over my shoulder. This is bulletproof. The next hour blurred. Printing, scanning, confirming timestamps with the university. By the time we left campus, I had enough evidence to bury the lie 10 times over. That night, I posted it all on the company's internal site. Every document, every scan, every line of truth Sienna thought would stay buried. The message above the file read, "No more whispers, just facts." At the press conference the next morning, I stepped up to the mic. Lights flashed. Reporters leaned forward, hoping for outrage. I gave them none. They came for my reputation, I said simply. All I did was open my files. I walked off before the next question could rise. Ethan was waiting near the side exit. He didn't say anything, just held out a small black USB drive. This has everything, he murmured. Sienna's voice raw. They thought I'd be grateful to be left alone. But I've never been quieter because I was defeated. Only because I was about to begin. The glass of the office windows reflected the evening skyline like a mirror too tired to lie. The building was quiet. Too quiet for a weekday. Most employees had already gone home, unaware of what was coming. Good. That meant fewer people to shield when the storm hit. I stood alone in the strategy room, a space that had once belonged to Harrison. Now it belonged to silence, and to me. On the table, printed transcripts, data spreadsheets, and one red folder marked Confidential. Lawrence. Ethan sat across from me, eyes focused as he scrolled through the latest draft of the Whitmore Future presentation. Rebranded, refined, and now weaponized. In another room, Brandon compiled names. He'd been meeting quietly with employees Caroline had fired or silenced, each story forming a puzzle piece no one had dared put together before. Some of them are scared, Brandon told me over coffee. But most of them, they're just relieved someone's finally listening. Lawrence called in at 6:15. Claire, the 5-year audit report is nearly complete. Daniel found Harrison funneled discretionary funds into a shell account. Twice. I exhaled. That's enough to trigger a breach of fiduciary duty, right? More than enough. We're preparing shareholder briefing packets. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Put it under the title Integrity Review. Soft enough to sound procedural. Sharp enough to land. By 9:30 p.m., I'd sent out the internal memo. A meeting was scheduled for next Tuesday. Mandatory attendance. Subject line, Integrity Review, 5-year audit proposal. At 10:03 p.m., I watched from the corner of the monitoring screen as Sienna's name popped up on Caroline's caller ID, the system we'd quietly installed last month. Just in case. She's going to burn us down, Sienna hissed. I can feel it. You're panicking, Caroline replied, crisp. It's just another PR stunt. We've been through worse. I pressed pause. Brandon's message notification chimed on my laptop. He'd uploaded a recording, grainy but clear. Caroline's voice unmistakable. Claire was never family. She was our PR project gone wrong. No venom. Just fact. Cold as a glass of vintage regret. I didn't flinch. I walked into the empty conference room, flicked on the camera meant for executive messages, and leaned forward into the lens. Then I smiled. Let's begin. I didn't come to prove I belonged. I came to show why they never did. The room was full. Not with noise, but with expectation. The kind of tension that sits in people's throats. Dozens of shareholders packed the grand hall of Whitmore Capital, the same room where Edward once launched entire ventures with a single sentence. Now, it was my stage. A massive screen projected the words, Whitmore Integrity Review, May 2023. Lights, cameras. The live stream counter climbed rapidly. Employees, regional heads, minor stakeholders, interns. Everyone was watching. I stood behind the podium without notes. Thank you all for coming, I began, voice steady. What you'll see today is not a performance. It's a record. To my right, Lawrence stood tall, hands folded in front of the manila folder that held the first knife. Our investigation found material evidence of misappropriation of corporate funds by Harrison Whitmore over the last 5 fiscal quarters, he announced. Behind me, the screen changed. Transaction records. A shell company in the Caymans. The timing matched perfectly with missing reports Brandon had flagged weeks ago. The first murmur spread through the room like a tremor. Then Brandon stepped forward. He didn't look at the audience, just at me, as he clicked play on the audio file. Caroline's voice filled the space. Claire was never family. She was our PR project gone wrong. No emotion, just control, just cruelty. The gasps weren't mine to suppress. I simply stood. Ethan came next, holding a thin printout. This is the internal IP report, he said. It traces the origin of the anonymous plagiarism scan to a home connection registered under Ms. Sienna Whitmore. The screen flashed. Sienna's apartment, time-stamped logins, a beat. Then I clicked the final video file. Edward's voice, tired but crisp, spilled from the speakers. His eyes stared out from the screen like he was still in the room. If you're watching this, Claire's done what I couldn't. She's led with truth. He paused. Legacy is not blood. It's integrity. And Claire, she's the future. The rest of you? You were always noise. Silence. Long, bitter. Lawrence stepped up once more. Shareholders will now vote on the three motions: dismissal of Harrison Whitmore from executive duties, permanent removal of Caroline Whitmore from the board, forced withdrawal of Sienna Whitmore from Whitmore Fund Access. The votes streamed in. 91%. Approved. No one applauded. They didn't need to. This wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Caroline stood, composed but pale. As she passed me, she leaned in. "You just killed your own family," she whispered. I didn't flinch. I turned to Lawrence. "Prepare the transition phase." ChatGPT da noi. For the first time, the name Whitmore didn't sound like a cage. It sounded like mine. Sunlight streamed into my office through the new skylights. Ones I had insisted on installing in the old stone ceiling that used to feel like it was pressing down on me. Green ivy curled along the frame of the large window behind my desk, and in place of the brooding oil paintings that once lined the walls, there were photographs of staff, of kids, of cities where Whitmore Capital was building again, not extracting. The press conference was in full swing downstairs. I watched it from the second floor via the monitor, not because I feared the spotlight, but because I didn't need it. I had already said what mattered. Effective immediately, I had announced earlier, Whitmore Capital will dissolve 3 branches currently under review for irregular financial reporting. That chapter ends today. Flashbulbs, stunned murmurs, but I wasn't done. In its place, we're opening the Edward Whitmore Foundation, named not to honor a legacy of power, but of integrity. Its mission: fund scholarships, provide free STEM courses, and build mentorship pipelines for disadvantaged children, including those who, like me, grew up outside the walls of power and had to fight just to be let through the door. Ooh. Brandon stood beside me now, holding a small folder. His report detailed 3 community projects, one already breaking ground in East Harlem. He smiled as he handed it over. "For once, I'm proud to carry this name. Not for power, but for purpose." I nodded, eyes on the glass door where employees were filing out to greet the children who had come today. The first cohort of foundation students. I didn't walk down immediately. I watched. They held handmade signs. "Thank you, Ms. Claire." One of them waved a single flower, magnolia white. Downstairs, Ethan stood with the advisory team, already coordinating the new employee feedback platform. Anonymous, transparent, tied to actual policy shifts. The shift wasn't just about the boardroom anymore. It was about what happened beyond it. When I finally stepped outside, one girl reached for my hand. She looked up and asked, "Are you the one who made the school?" I bent down. "No," I said gently. "We're making it together." She smiled, satisfied with that answer. I wished Edward could see this. Back upstairs, the light had shifted. Softer now. On my desk was a cream envelope, hand-addressed. No return address. I didn't need one. I opened it. No apology. Just 4 words written in sharp ink. Still not over yet. I folded the note slowly and slipped it into the drawer beside Edward's watch. Not fear, not dread, just preparation. 6 months ago, I sat here wondering if I belonged. Today, I just sat. And that was enough. The magnolia tree had bloomed like it never had before. Petals open, wide and fearless, the same way I finally felt inside. Spring had soaked the Whitmore garden in a golden haze, softening the sharpness of its carefully manicured hedges. It no longer looked like a place meant to keep people out. It looked like a place that had been waiting. I walked alone. No security detail, no press in sight. Just me and the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The garden behind the mansion still smelled of citrus and cut grass, but today it held something warmer. Maybe memory. The stone bench came into view, nestled beneath the magnolia, still as weathered as I remembered. Edward had once sat there with the newspaper rustling in his hands, looking over the top edge at me with eyes that said, "This is yours. You just don't know it yet." I sat. No agenda, no speech rehearsals, just breath and silence. Pulling the faded envelope from my coat pocket, I unfolded his last handwritten letter. His script wobbled in places, but the strength never left the ink. You don't need to become what they think a Whitmore is. You only need to stay who you've always been. That will be more than enough. I closed the letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it beside me on the bench. Then I ran my fingertips across the stone. Cool. Textured. I reached for the pocket knife I always carried. Edward's, actually. And slowly carved 3 words onto the edge of the bench. Made, not born. The letters weren't perfect. Neither was I. But they would last longer than the whispers ever did. A soft shuffle of shoes sounded behind me. Raymond approached with his usual quiet grace, holding a bouquet of white magnolias and snowdrops. He placed them gently beneath the tree. He'd be proud, you know, he said, his voice like gravel warmed by sunlight. I looked up. He was proud long before I became CEO. That's what mattered. Raymond gave a single nod, then stepped back, letting me have the silence again. The breeze picked up slightly. I closed my eyes. For once, there was no to-do list pressing on my chest. No meetings, no votes, no strategies. Only the rustling leaves and the whisper of something deeper. A knowing. I didn't win. I remembered who I was before they made me forget. The bench accepted my weight like it always had. Steady. Waiting. Like it had been meant for me all along. My phone buzzed on the stone beside me. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Whitmore? A man's voice said. Gentle, curious. I believe I'm your uncle, from the Collins side. I built an empire on the belief that family is chosen, but blood has a way of whispering through cracks you thought were sealed. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped into the little bookstore. It smelled like sun-warmed paper and old wood, like the breath of a memory you forgot you had. Dust motes spun through the light, streaming in from the front windows. Everything about the place was quiet, deliberate, almost sacred. It couldn't have been further from the Whitmore estate, and that's why I was here. I heard the sound of boxes being shifted in the back. Then a man stepped out. He looked like someone I might have passed on the street. Graying beard, round glasses, jeans soft from years of use. But the moment our eyes met, I knew. Claire? He asked, voice gentle but laced with nerves. I nodded. You're Peter. He gave a soft chuckle. Your mother always said you had a serious face, even as a toddler. Seems that stuck. I didn't smile. Not yet. He gestured toward the back. Would you mind if we sat? It's quieter in the reading corner. I followed him past rows of mystery novels and coffee-stained philosophy books until we reached a small alcove where 2 worn chairs flanked a table stacked with paperbacks. Peter reached into a shoebox on the shelf and pulled out a small envelope, yellowed with age. I've had this for over 20 years, he said, holding it out. It was the last thing your mother wrote before the accident. She asked me to give it to you when the time felt right. My fingers trembled as I took it. The handwriting on the front was looped and neat. Claire. Inside was a folded letter and a photo. The picture showed 2 people in their 20s, sunlight catching in their hair, laughter in their eyes. My mother had her arm around a man with the same jawline I saw in the mirror every day. They looked like they belonged to a different world, a freer one. I unfolded the letter and read, My dearest Claire, if you are holding this, it means you've grown into the woman we always believed you would become. You were born from love. Not mistake, not pity, not obligation. Never let anyone make you forget that. When you are ready, let the truth find you. Until then, know this. You are wanted every single day. Mom, I didn't realize I was crying until I saw the ink blur where my tears hit the paper. Peter didn't say a word. He just sat across from me, hands folded, letting me have whatever silence I needed. I didn't come here for sentiment. I finally said, voice raw. He nodded. I figured. But I thought you deserved something that wasn't performance for once. I looked at the photo again. I've spent so long fighting to prove I'm not just some charity case. I didn't realize I'd buried a whole other kind of truth. You don't have to choose, Peter said. Edward saw who you were, but your parents, your real ones, they gave you the roots. I hugged the letter to my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding armor. I was holding something soft, something real. Thank you, I whispered, unsure if it was for him or the letter, or maybe the part of myself I'd just uncovered. Peter reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a plain business card. He set it on the table. I'm not here to chase you, he said. Whether you call or not, I'm glad you know. I stood slowly, feeling the weight in my chest settle into something less jagged. At the door, I looked back once. Maybe one day. Outside, Raymond waited silently in the car, engine idling. As I slipped into the seat, he glanced at the envelope in my hand but didn't ask. We drove off, leaving the bookstore behind. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't leaving anything unfinished. I used to think I needed their approval to matter. But the truth? I've mattered all along, because I refused to disappear. The glass doors to the top floor of Whitmore Capital slid open with a soft click. I stepped into the hallway, barefoot on the polished wood, the early evening sun painting the walls in gold. The air smelled like fresh eucalyptus and new beginnings. From the balcony overlooking the atrium, I could see the youth team in the training space below. Mockboard meetings, laughter between brainstorms, a nervous intern dropping her pen and then bursting into giggles. A space once filled with whispers about lineage and legacy now echoed with something simpler: possibility. The new sign over the main conference room read, The Whitmore Foundation and Company, and beneath it, etched into the glass, integrity, vision, voice. I carried a stack of final papers to my desk. The last of them, the minutes from the board establishing our next-gen leadership program, a mentorship and scholarship initiative for kids who, like I once was, had talent but no invitations. I signed with a steady hand. Claire Whitmore, founder. A notification blinked on my screen. One final email, already typed but unsent. I opened it and reread the words. Caroline, I don't need to be angry. You took from me many things, but not my belief in myself. I no longer need to prove anything. Claire, I clicked send, not for closure, just to end the noise. Ethan passed my door, tapping his phone to his palm absently. Next-gen stats are trending up, he said, smiling. You'll want to see the social metrics later. Brandon walked by moments later, nodding once before disappearing into a meeting room already full of young interns asking questions I used to be afraid to raise. Helena had left a sticky note on my desk earlier in the day. No one whispers anymore. They ask out loud. I smiled. That was enough. I walked to the door and placed one last object beneath the office nameplate. A thin, hand-carved block of wood. On it, 3 simple words. Made. Not born. The sky outside had deepened into a bronze blue. I stepped onto the balcony and closed my eyes. For the first time in months, my breath came without resistance. No chessboard, no schemes, just air. Light. My own name, unweighted by expectation. Below, someone called, Ms. Whitmore. A new hire, maybe. I waved back and she smiled. Not out of obligation, but admiration. And then, in the quiet, I heard it. Not from outside, but from somewhere deeper. This isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who you are and refusing to be erased. The sun slid lower over the horizon. I didn't chase it. I stayed. They tried to erase her with lies, but in the end, it was their truths that destroyed them. Claire didn't just reclaim a company. She redefined a legacy, not through vengeance, but by proving that justice speaks loudest when delivered in silence. Like a stone bench built to outlast the storm, her story reminds us, no wall of deceit can stand forever against the tide of truth. Sometimes it only takes one brave choice to undo years of silence. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.